Hello there, so I'm inviting you to come with us today on our walk, and it begins here. And this is a place dedicated to celebrating the spirit of the willow plant, and in the distance you can see some really big obvious trees, and they're topped with that kind of pale brown. That's willow. So we've never been here before. We're very close to Glastonbury. So I thought I'd just take you with us and see what comes up today. So let's focus in on willow a bit. So willow is a very special tree. One of the things that's really particular about it is you can come along and savagely cut the whole plant down and just leave a trunk about 4 foot high. You can see one straight ahead there, and it will just spring back and grow so rapidly, and in 3 years' time you would never realise it's ever been cut. So that's kind of what you're looking at. So it's got this incredible ability to come back after having been savaged by humans. So it does make it very special. Now if we just go up and look at the tips, just look at the tips of these branches, look at the colour. It's very particular, isn't it? So this is a lovely little spot, a willow grove. So the other thing about willow is it's very cooperative with humans, and it loves to be worked with in all sorts of ways. There's a particular variety of willows which are called osiers, and they're used for basket making. The other thing that willow does is it draws the water out of the ground. So if it's a very boggy area, if there's a lot of marsh, it will actually take up the water. And now I'm being drawn over here. And we're looking at something rather different over here. And look at that. That's the very first inklings of spring. Tiny little shoots on this tree, and this is an elder tree, and there we are, there's some more. And that's the thing, when you come into nature, at first it all looked pretty dead from a distance, didn't it? But the closer I get, the more aware I become of the life. And then I'm drawn to show you this. So on this branch there is that vivid yellow colour, and there's also some green there as well. So you've got lichens and pleurococcus. So an alga, and lichen is a combination of an alga and a fungus living together in harmony. So there's all that life going on there. And apart from the sounds of the traffic and the planes in the distance, we can hear the birds as well. And I want to show you this. Just take a look at that. There it is. Let me just do something on the focus if we can. Look at the colour of that. Richness of the purple there. And those little green shoots on the top just beginning to sprout. And so this is really a metaphor for what's going on at the moment, because what's going on at the moment, for people who are tuned into any of the media, whether alternative or orthodox, it all sounds rather dire, doesn't it? All sounds rather awful. It's rather like, at first glance, this little willow grove looked rather dead. But then, the more we start to spend time here, the more it comes into focus, the more we become aware of life, the abundance of teeming life. And now what I'm drawn to particularly is the base of the trunk of this tree. And we've got the most beautifully vivid mosses growing there. That's really spectacular. And if I just go very slightly to the left, those tiny little leaves are the beginnings of the youngest nettle leaves. So the nettles are starting to sprout. In fact, if I go to the other side of this trunk of this tree, now that's starting to look more clearly and obviously like a nettle, isn't it? So here we are in mid-February, and although on the surface it seemed like pretty dead actually, the more we decline into minuteness and go into the detail, the more we discover how alive it all is here. And there's the thing, if I had the ability to go really into minuteness, go into the microscopical nature, and if I could go right into the soil, under the earth, I would discover the most magnificent rooting system. And this tree, this willow tree's roots are about 2.5 times the canopy of the upper branches. So if it's 20 foot high, then it's going to be 50 foot deep. And that's another thing about trees, hidden depths. And the other thing to realise, as I'm hearing the sound of the wind and birds in quadraphonic sound all around me, there's bird song, well, that's really special. And it makes me realise that there is so much abundance here, so much abundance of life. And I know if I was to just get 1 cubic centimetre of soil out of this ground, it'd be teeming with millions and millions and millions of microbes of all kinds, and nematodes, which are little microscopic worms, and a whole variety of other different life forms. So what I'm standing on is actually teeming with life, and this is the abundance of nature. So when we leave behind the media where the mainstream are all turned and we come out into nature, this is what we become aware of. And the more we stop and take stock and notice, it's like, yeah, there is so much life here, there's so much abundance, plenty. And if I draw myself up and away, and I take myself back into the awareness of this tree trunk, and if I just travel up, and we can see when I reach this point, that's obviously a point where it's been cut in the past and there's had a load of new growth, and it extending up and up and up, up and up all the way. What an abundance of growth. It's so alive, this willow tree. It's so brimming full and teeming with life. It's so alive. And that is beholding the abundance that surrounds us, just to realise how much life there is in this little willow grove. And that's me just spending a few moments. Imagine if I was to be here for longer, what else I would discover. With other life forms I would suddenly be much more aware of than I was when I first arrived. And it's so great to be aware of the power and the majesty and the beauty of nature, and the posturing of human beings on political stages suddenly seems rather shallow and irrelevant, and it feels like, yes, this is where life is, this is the beauty, this is the abundance, this is the majesty, this is the marvellousness of creation. And as I go over here, drawn by these leaves that look quite ragged and quite tired, and as I go to investigate, I realise that this is a host of brambles, and if I was to come along at the right time of year, give it 6 months, something like that. This will be teeming with blackberries. Blackberries, one of nature's great gifts, and every time you pick blackberries and eat them in the wild, apart from the blackberries themselves, you're taking all the microbes that are on top of the fruits and inside the fruits, extending your microbiome, making it much more rich and diverse. And that indeed is one of the gifts about being alive, is to be aware that there's microbes in nature and there's microbes in us, and every time we add more microbes from nature to us, that gives us greater diversity. That nourishes the gut, and the gut nourishes the brain, so we end up being more intelligent just by taking in the wonderful fruits of nature. So thanks very much for coming on this little walk with me. Cheers for now.